What's up, guys? Welcome back to the recap of the Combat Sports Weekend. We skipped last weekend because there really wasn't that much on outside of UFC 297, which we did cover in a results video and a breakdown video after that event. So we're back this week. There was no UFC last weekend, so we're actually gonna have to go to some regional promotions today to take a look at some of the action in combat sports. And to be fair, there was a good deal of combat this weekend, one of them being Octagon's trip to Newcastle for Octagon 52. Jack Cartwright was in his second fight since a Contender Series opportunity, a former bantamweight champion for Cage Warriors and an amateur champion for BFC. On the other side of the cage, Jonas Magard was coming off of a loss to Felipe Lima in a bantamweight title fight on Octagon 45. But previous to that, he was on a 3-fight win streak. He earned himself the Octagon bantamweight champion against a former UFC fighter in Felipe Masic. So this contest had a lot of potential to be a great one and a history of a really bitter rivalry between the two fighters. And at the end of the day, it was Jonas Magard's night. He was able to implement a great game plan with a couple of massive right hands throughout the 3 rounds and a mix of takedowns controlling where the fight was. This all gave in to Jonas Magard earning the unanimous decision on the night in the main event of Octagon 52. In the co-main event, we saw another extremely intriguing prospect who might get another shot at the Dana White Contender Series very soon. He won his co-main event. Mattia Peñas continues to impress in his opportunities outside of the UFC. He improved to 9-1 with his 8th finish, being the first man to finish the former Cage Warriors champion Matthew Bonner, crumbling him with a beautiful body shot in the second round. Peñas is now 3-0 following a disappointing showing on the Contender Series against Cedricus Dumas, where he was submitted as a near 2-1 favorite. This recent performance did showcase that Peñas might be addressing the takedown and submission issues, and Peñas is a massive middleweight with a glory kickboxing background. If he can stop at a takedown and develops any sort of jiu-jitsu game, he is going to be an extremely scary fighter, even for a lot of the UFC middleweights. But for now, I can easily see him getting an Octagon middleweight title shot or possibly getting another call to the UFC Contender Series in the very near future. Other notable performances on the Octagon 52 card: Max Holzer submitted Corey Fry in the second round to improve his undefeated record to 7, and Eduardo Kexel on the prelims defeated Raphael Hudson via submission to improve to 10-1. Those are some of the impressive European records that won their fights on Saturday. But nonetheless, that was Octagon 52 in Newcastle. There was also an LFA event, 175. The LFA would return to Sao Paulo, Brazil, where the heavyweight title was on the line between Bruno Lopez and Marcos Bragaucao. And this LFA 175 card was stacked with talent. Of the 13 winners on the night, 10 of them featured a record with sub-1 loss. There was also 8 total finishes, with all of the last 4 fights finishing before the final bell. The heavyweight main event featuring Bruno Lopez, who left the LFA in 2022 as the heavyweight champion, would return after being unsuccessful on Dana White Contender Series 2023 against Brendan Ribeiro. Marcos also had a stop on Dana White Contender Series all the way back in 2019. He was unsuccessful against now UFC fighter Jamal Pogues. And this main event was really back and forth between the two in the first round. Making it to the second round, the most recent LFA heavyweight champion, Bruno Lopez, would secure an arm triangle choke and force a submission with only 2 seconds remaining on the second round clock. With the victory, Lopez would technically become the first man in the LFA to ever defend the heavyweight title, even though he did make a stop in the Contender Series for an attempt at the UFC. The other knockouts included Samuel Silva, Marco Tulio, and Rafael Pereira. On the main card, the Brazilian card showcased a ton of talent, finishers in both the striking and grappling game. They were able to put on a great show in front of the fans of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Finally, for the world of mixed martial arts, ONE FC put on their 165 in Tokyo, Japan this past weekend. In the premier mixed martial arts bout, Shinya Aoki, the Japanese legend, defeated UFC veteran John Lineker in the very first round via a face crank. This gets Shinya Aoki back in the winners column after losing his last 2 mixed martial arts bouts and 4 straight in different variations of combat sports provided on ONE FC. Also to note in mixed martial arts on the ONE FC card, Gary Tonin is becoming a serious problem in the mixed martial arts cage. The American is a well-known Brazilian jiu-jitsu ace. He defeated Martin Nguyen in the first round via a rear naked choke and improved himself to 9-1. With the time following the win, Gary Tonin used it to call out the winner of Kai Tang versus Stan Lee that is set up for 166 in a rematch where Kai Tang was able to defeat Thon Lee. If Thon Lee were to win and Gary Tonin would get that match, matchup, it would serve as a rematch for Gary Tonon's sole career loss. If you're interested in any other ONE FC results, they will be on screen now. The co-main event and main event of this card were not contested in mixed martial arts. There was a kickboxing bantamweight championship fight on the main event, and then there was a welterweight jiu-jitsu championship for ONE FC in the co-main event. That'll wrap up the Combat Sports recap, but I also wanted to use this episode and wrap it up with the Combat Sports Central organizational rankings. Now, these rankings are just kind of my put together list because I've done so many career highlights for UFC fighters and fighters outside the UFC in the PFL, Bellator, and stuff like that. I wanted to set up a rankings for these Combat Sport recaps based mainly on their main card and their promotional material going into events. And this is currently how I have my rankings set. I want this to be kind of a community thing. So let me know in the comments if I'm missing anything, if there's anything that you would change in your reasoning behind it. Just try to convince me of your opinion and why you think that might be the case. But the day one organizational rankings go as follows. I have the UFC at number 1, obviously, with Bellator and PFL at number 2. Now, this is a little bit debatable. I have ONE FC at number 3. You might swap Bellator PFL with ONE FC in some cases. Then continuing down, I have Brave Combat Federation, OKTAGON, the recent OKTAGON event in Europe. And to be honest, I knew less about OKTAGON than I did some other organizations going into this weekend, but there were a lot of great promotional pieces from OKTAGON that I did want to include them in at number 5. Then number 6, I have the Legacy Fighting Alliance. Number 7, KSW. And then based on my career highlight videos, they didn't have events this weekend, but based on my career highlight videos, a lot of the prospects come from some of these below organizations. So I ranked it ACA, ACB. These are two of the same organizations, just rebranded. Cage Warriors, Risen, Invicta, Combate Global, Fight Night Global, and then Pancrase. If I'm missing any organizations, please leave them in the comment section below. I don't doubt that I am. And let me know if you would switch any of these organizations, and again, your reasoning why. And then in next episode next week, I might give or take and change a little bit of this up, but it will be based on some of these Combat Sport recaps for the rest of the year and a lot of the career highlight videos I do. I'm also probably going to start doing lists and including the fighters I do career highlights on in kind of a PDF for these organizations to kind of understand the pipelines that lead fighters to the UFC, which in my opinion is going to have a really hard time being dethroned anytime soon. So I can confidently say that they'll be at number 1 for a very long time, but that's just my organizational rankings here at Combat Sports Central. Again, they will change as the year goes on, and that's just a cool way I wanted to wrap up today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to smash that like button. If you enjoy combat sports, make sure you keep it tuned in here to Combat Sports Central. We recap all the major events and regional events all around the world. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out, guys.